Welcome in for another edition of the Morning Espresso here on the SDH Network, presented by Oglethorpe University, Atlanta's premier undergraduate learning experience and soccer powerhouse. Not a fun morning on the Morning Espresso when there's news like we're seeing out of Chile. I turned on the Copa Libertadores match last night between Colo Colo and Fortaleza. Wanted to see a former Atlanta United player in Mateus Josechu, who now plays for Fortaleza. The match was being played in Santiago in Chile, and it did not get completed. I turned it on early in the second half, and fan violence ended up causing the game to be initially stopped and then eventually abandoned. There's more that has come out after the fact, and it was coming out during the match as well, and that's led to some of the issues. But this is something that CONMEBOL, this is something that the Chilean police, Colo Colo themselves, the organized support, all of these different things are going to have to figure out, and it's going to be an ugly situation for a while. Two fans died on Thursday before the match. According to authorities, a group of fans were attempting to force their way into the stadium, tore down one of the venue's protective fences. The victims were reportedly trapped beneath them. There's reports of the involvement of a police car in hitting the fence, trying to break up the fans who were trying to break into the stadium. There were fans who had tickets. One of the fans who passed away, both teenagers, by the way, had tickets, according to family members. Reports of the involvement and reports of the deaths made their way to the fans, according to Chilean reports, as the second half began. There was a moment of silence for the fans who lost their lives, and then there were chants against the police. Ultimately, what happened then was a another protective wall. It was like a plexiglass wall between the fans and the field that was broken, and fans began to run out onto the field. Fortaleza players ran away from the situation, and you had fights between the fans who were running onto the field and police. There were water cannons involved. The match was interrupted in around the 65th minute. Once it was clear to do so, Fortaleza players ran for cover in the locker room. Colo Colo players tried to calm down the fans. That didn't work. The refereeing team informed everyone that the match had been officially suspended at this point. And then eventually, after the stadium was cleared and there were other incidents of violence outside the stadium and around the stadium, ultimately the match was officially suspended. Now, there's a lot of different things that could happen after this. It could be a forfeit loss, a 3-0 loss to Colo Colo. There could be extremely heavy fines. You could even see CONMEBOL kick Colo Colo out of the competition entirely. There are some questions as to what was known when it was decided to go ahead with the match after the pre-match violence. And now in Chile, there's talk about games in with involving other teams being suspended. The Chilean Primera División, that might be suspended. The fan rally for Friday for Colo Colo ahead of their Super Clásico against Universidad de Chile, that has been canceled. The game is in doubt on Sunday at the Estadio Nacional. So lots of different things are going to come out of this, but just you hate to see anything like this. You hate to see young fans losing their lives over going to a game, and you hate to see the lack of crowd control with fans who have tickets or don't have tickets or are trying to break in, that end up resulting in these sorts of things. And it's something that is not new to CONMEBOL, and it's something that CONMEBOL as an organization is going to have to create some better security protocols to protect fans from whether it's people who don't have tickets trying to break in, criminals, gangs, what have you. But you have to have better protocols in place, and that was not in place here at all. And it's ultimately resulted in the loss of life of two Colo Colo fans. So we will see what happens next in Chile and in the Copa Libertadores. It is going to be a big conversation worldwide as it starts to make its way around the world. There are some other bits of news in the Morning Espresso today. Let's try to get into those a bit. In Major League Soccer, there was a big conversation yesterday about changing the calendar from the February to December calendar to one that would have a season start in August and end in more like May or early June. MLS has announced that the league will explore a switch to the schedule in the strongest way it ever has. A second phase of exploration is the way it was described, but it's not going to happen until 2027 at the earliest. So the 2026 season is expected to continue as it currently has, with a very long break in the middle for the World Cup. Feels like from just a logistical standpoint, that would have been the best time to make the switch. It's not going to happen according to what MLS is saying. There will be another board of governors meeting at the All-Star game in the summer. So we see what happens there when it comes to all of this. But it can happen at any point. I think the way you change the schedule can happen in any way. You're going to have a short season, a mini tournament, whatever, in the first half of the calendar year, and then start your new format in August after a summer break. The calendar isn't as dramatic of a change as I think some would lead you to believe. I know there's talk about the northern venues and how you handle games for them. Well, right now they would host an MLS Cup in the first week of December if they get there. So if that's your benchmark, and right now, they could host games in the third week of February when the season begins currently. And typically they don't, but they could. So those, I think, dates would be very similar to what they are. Maybe you go one more week in December, maybe you start one week earlier in February. And in the middle of the season where those dates would fall, you just have to make sure that, stadiums that can't host cold weather games are not going to, and you try to balance the schedule that way. It just changes the idea of not wanting to have noon kickoffs in Houston during July and August. So it's there's not going to be a perfect schedule format. There's not going to be a perfect calendar for Major League Soccer because of the size of the country and because of the different climates and because of the north and south divides and all of that. It's just not going to happen. So you have to figure out which one works better. And I think having your finals in May, June is better than having them in December. I think it's better from a PR standpoint. I think it's better from a weather standpoint in more parts of the league. And it also aligns you with the international transfer market, which is going to help your business, which is another huge, huge part of this. So I think it's going to happen. I wished it would have happened coming off of the World Cup. I don't think not having it happen after the World Cup is a failure by any means, but I think it would have worked a little bit better and been a better opportunity to launch it. So now if it happens in 27, it happens in 27 and you move forward that way. Other bits of news on the Espresso: Bayern Munich will host Borussia Dortmund in a game that is typically one of the biggest in the German calendar, but kind of a little bit of a game that doesn't have quite the same meaning and the same feeling after poor Champions League performances from both of the teams in the midweek. The game doesn't really have much of a role in deciding the league title. Bayern Munich has a 6-point lead on Bayer Leverkusen. Dortmund is in eighth place. They're trying to get into the top four to qualify for the Champions League next year. That game will be on Saturday. Reports to this morning out of Liverpool, and it's official now. Mo Salah has signed a new 2-year contract for Liverpool. This saga has went on for years, and he's going to stay for another couple of seasons. There were a lot of things said, and a lot of I don't. It felt like ill feeling, maybe not. Maybe that's turned. So keep an eye on it, and we'll see if Mo Salah can continue at the level that he's been at this year, where he's been absolutely amazing. UEFA, they decided to keep extra time in European knockout matches after a proposal to change the rule was discussed. The proposal would have had games go to penalties instead of straight to extra time. And UEFA decided that that would encourage more defensive football with underdogs playing for penalties. I think with the amount of games that players are playing, you're going to need to scrap extra time. And maybe you scrap it in everything up to the semifinal or up to the final. I'm not sure, but I think it's going to happen. Andre Onana He was described by Nemanja Matic as one of the worst Manchester United goalkeepers ever ahead of the match, and he did not help himself in the match. Two errors helped Lyon to a 2-2 draw in their Europa League quarterfinal first leg. Onana, first error, he missed Thiago Almada's bouncing free kick. It was a curling one. It looked like it could have come off of a player in front of Onana. He had to hold his line. It gets past him. Looked like he was going to get away with that. 2 goals for Manchester United. They had a 2-1 lead. And then in stoppage time, he spills a shot at the feet of Ryan Cherky, who puts it home, and that made it 2-2 going into the second leg. Really disappointing performance from Onana. Ruben Amorim stood up for him in the press conference afterwards, as a good manager would, but Andre Onana has made so many mistakes in goal for Manchester United. Kylian Mbappe, he is going on the attack, I guess is the best way to put it here, with multiple lawsuits to try to resolve a legal dispute between himself and PSG. Mbappe says that PSG owes him $61 million in unpaid wages. The Paris court are starting proceedings after Mbappe's legal team has requested it, trying to seize the money. Mbappe has said that a decision has been taken, this time to go on the attack. 1 year was the deadline we set for ourselves for trying to resolve this dispute as peacefully as possible. PSG says that when Mbappe was sidelined before the 2023-2024 season, following his decision not to extend his contract, that there was a verbal agreement with him opting to relinquish bonuses in order to return to the team. Uh, Mbappe's legal team has said they have not shown any evidence of an agreement. Mbappe was frustrated because he felt that promises to sign key players were not kept. He was annoyed because his contract was through 2024, but PSG paraded him in front of fans holding up a jersey with 2025 on it. There was an option at the player's discretion for that extra season. Mbappe told the club in June of 23 that he would not take the option. He would go into the last year of his contract. PSG then tried to sell him. Mbappe said no, and it got really ugly to the point that he was left out of the opening league match of the season. He ended up returning to the lineup. Um, very, very ugly situation. He played out his contract and left for Real Madrid. And at Real Madrid, it's not going so well at the moment. They might not win La Liga. They might not win the Champions League. Carlo Ancelotti might not continue, and Brazil is kind of pushing Ancelotti to make a decision here because they want Ancelotti to come to the Brazilian national team and they want it to happen before the Club World Cup. Real Madrid probably, potentially, would like to move on and bring in Xabi Alonso, but they'd want to do that sooner rather than later as well. Very awkward situation. And when you go back to the on the field for Real Madrid, this is a team that is running far, far less than any of the remaining teams in the Champions League. It's not even close, and it wasn't close in the match and the loss to Arsenal, and it's starting to show. When you have individual talents, that can mask the running side of it, but the individual talents aren't making up that gap right now. 13 kilometers less covered by Real Madrid versus Arsenal, and it showed. And the forwards, Mbappe, Vinicius, and Rodrigo, they occupy the first, second, and fourth places, respectively, for forwards who have run the least since the start of the Champions League. That's going to have to change in the second leg as they try to overturn a 3-0 deficit to Arsenal. Couple final ones on the Morning Espresso. One, Alejandro Dominguez, the president of CONMEBOL, wants the 2030 Men's World Cup to be temporarily expanded to 64 teams. Pretty much everybody is pushing back against this. I know it's the 100th anniversary of the competition, but no, because if they do it once, I think they're going to do it consistently, and then qualifying becomes a mess. And there'd still be drama in qualifying, but the tournament wouldn't have quite the same meaning. It does make the format a little easier in terms of the first and second place teams, and the groups all would go into a round of 32 at that point. Sure, but I don't think you get enough out of it to make that change. I would vote against it. Gold Cup draw was done yesterday. Group A is Mexico, Costa Rica, Suriname, and the Dominican Republic. Group B, Canada, Honduras, El Salvador, and Curacao. Group C, Panama, Jamaica, Guatemala, and Guadeloupe. And Group D for the U.S. men's national team, it will include Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, and Saudi Arabia. That's the Gold Cup that'll be this summer in the United States for the CONCACAF title. That's going to do it for us on the Morning Espresso for this week. It's a busy rest of the week on the network. Tonight, we will be at South Forsyth for high school matches with Denmark taking on South Forsyth. Men's and women's action starting at 5:30 this evening. Tomorrow, we will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium bright and early for a 2:45 kickoff between Atlanta United and the New England Revolution. Hopefully, you can join us for that on 92.9 The Game, the Odyssey app, or in the stadium at the Benz. Hopefully, you can join us tonight on Mixler for our high school coverage. And hopefully, you can join me back here on Monday for the next edition of the Morning Espresso presented by Oglethorpe University.